Well, as I said, it's now been over 2 years since Canadian pastor Reverend Hyun-Soo Lim was detained in North Korea and sentenced to a lifetime of hard labor for his humanitarian work there. The 62-year-old prisoner recently had a visit from the Swedish ambassador to North Korea and had a rare chance to speak to his family on the phone. To update us on recent developments, Lim family spokesperson Lisa PAK joins me now. Lisa, thanks for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
It was good news that there was this diplomatic visit.
Definitely.
I know a lot of people are scratching their heads saying the Swedish.
Yes.
Why Sweden?
Sweden is the protecting power for Canada because 2001 to 2010 there were some diplomatic relations between Canada and the DPRK, but in 2010 those diplomatic relationships ended, and so the protecting power is a country that kind of goes in lieu to protect Western interests. In this particular case, Canada's interest in Pyongyang. Sweden has always had that relationship with DPRK. An example that might help contextualize for people would be the way that Switzerland was a protecting power for the U.S. in Cuba until 2015. And so in that, they play that role for us and Western powers as well. I believe that they're actually helping the U.S. with their 2 cases as well.
So what can you tell us now about this diplomatic meeting?
I do know that Sweden has been able to send their ambassador to meet with Reverend Lim, and I believe that's where the phone call also happened as well.
Yeah, the phone call to his family now, that must have been incrolly emotional. It's
Absolutely,
literally the first time they've talked to him.
It's the first
since
time
he was
they've heard
detained.
his voice. Everything else was, through the camera, through interviews, and everything. There were a couple letters that were exchanged, but it's very different hearing the voice of somebody you love over the phone when you've been missing them and it's this kind of circumstance. Yeah.
And so can you tell us what they talked about or how it went?
Very guarded conversation. There are people listening in, but I think the most important was to hear the voice of Reverend Lim, to know that he's okay, to hear him say it himself. And nobody knows like family, the intonation of voice, just you get this feeling if somebody's under pressure or if they're being mistreated or if they're lying. And none of that came across. The family was very assured that he was doing very well in the DPRK as best as they can treat him. He was being treated well.
And there's been a lot of concern around his health. I mean, I remember interviewing Kenneth Bay, who said that there wasn't a lot of food. There's 6 days a week of hard labor. So he would often end up malnourished in the hospital. I know that Reverend Lim, we heard, was in the hospital last year quite a bit. So any sense about how he's doing health-wise? I think that's the biggest concern.
Yes, well, he was good enough to be on the phone, and which is a huge sign. And if the DPRK officials were uncomfortable with that, I'm sure that they would have delayed the phone call, not allowed it. But to know that he was able to come to the phone, express his opinions, and also say that he himself is doing as best as he can be, I think that was a huge encouragement to the family.
A lot of people obviously concerned about what the Canadian government is or isn't doing, and a lot of this is really clouded in secrecy, and that's to protect the diplomatic process.
Yes, absolutely.
Are they doing enough? Can they be doing more?
We absolutely feel that they are. The whole case started when the Harper administration was, the government in power in Canada. And in 2015, after the elections, there was a little bit of concern, obviously, on the family part that maybe the case would get lost in between the transition of government. The Liberals have been doing a great job in keeping the family in the loop as well. There was that switch of foreign minister as well from Dion to Minister Freeland as well. But despite all that, the family has been reassured time and again, and they do feel very comfortable that Canada has been taking all measures possible. They have said that they have been taking all avenues possible as well. So the DPRK does have a permanent mission in the UN, and so trying to use that avenue also, with the help of the Swedish embassy, trying to maintain communication, I think, is the most important. So that's what they've been doing. Family is reassured, so we are as well.
I think of Kenneth Bay, the longest held American prisoner in North Korea. Now, that was over 2 years, and now, of course, Reverend Lim over 2 years. I mean, time is moving on. Is there some concern, that it's just dragging on too long, that is he ever going to be freed?
I remember when this whole thing broke and we wanted him back the day after tomorrow, kind of thing. Yesterday for us, one of the things that we're reminded is that everything is under God's control. I know Kenneth Bay is a believer as well. When you're going through it, it always seems hard. I just, was watching Stephen Curtis Chapman's video interview and talking about the highs and the lows of going through life, and it is a journey. And we're reminded that God is in control. So it has been hard. At the same time, there have been moments, even with the family, where you have a good day and then you have a bad day. I think these days, especially as we see the diplomatic relationship and the talking just continuing on, better days, always hopeful. I mean, this is God we're talking about. We trust his timing, so.
You know, we talk a lot about how Reverend Lim is doing, but how is his family doing? Because we don't talk a lot about that, but this is a tough journey for them as well.
Again, just when I speak with them, bad days and good days, but I think at the end of the day, when they know that people are praying, and you're always tested in these moments, how much do you actually trust God? And do you know his heart? Do you know that nobody knows like God, the insight that he has, the way, you know, there's international diplomacy involved. There's, you know, things that are so many variables of unknown. So where does this place you in terms of a believing family, trusting Reverend Lim, your father, your husband, the senior pastor in this situation? I think we have God to go to, and the family feels very much assured. I think their faith grew in this process, which is often what we see when believers are in a tough situation, where as we continue on, we rely only on God and we see that our faith grows. So despite the circumstances, I think as believers, I think many people can resonate with us. We're very grateful for the way that God has sustained the family and the church and those who love him. So.
Well, we're just about out of time here, but one of the reasons we keep bringing this up is that we want to keep people praying. We don't want them to forget and move on with their lives. So what can we pray for Reverend Lim and his family?
First of all, just for his continued health, for faith to maintain, for the hope to not dissipate or very long, if it continues on longer, for us to never give up hope. For the Canadian government, just wisdom and insight in handling such a guarded and secretive diplomatic relationship. You know, it can be very difficult, but we're very grateful for the people involved. So
thank you so much for coming.
Thank you so much for
keeping us updated, Lisa.
Thank you.
Well, if you're at home and you feel like, I don't have any purpose in my life, I don't know how God could ever use me, you are getting an assignment right now. You can pray every single day for Reverend Lim and be part of the multitudes of people who are believing God for a miracle. I believe we're going to see him on this set, sitting here telling us and thanking God that he's free. And I am longing for that day and believing God for that day. Won't you join me? Let's get together a huge group of people praying for this pastor and seeing God answer our prayers.